Most businesses are using AI completely wrong. They're automating tasks instead of increasing profit. Today's guest has built custom AI systems that generates hundreds of qualified leads, and he says the biggest mistake founders are making is building what they think they need. If you want to know where AI actually drives revenue and where it's just hype, this episode will change the way you think. Well, let's go straight into it. You say most businesses are using AI wrong. Where are they getting it wrong?
Yeah, so sort of the root of the evil here is somebody walks into the room, usually somebody in leadership, and says something like, "We need to be doing more AI. What can we do in AI?" And this is just the classic solution in search of a problem thinking. So then people start thinking of the things they've seen AI do before and kind of looking for a place to use it in order to satisfy the requirement of doing AI, rather than trying to solve a real underlying business problem.
Why are we in this position?
So I mean, it's probably just the huge amounts of hype that everybody's exposed to over AI, right? There's a lot of FOMO out there and a lot of hype content trying to get everybody excited, and like deservedly so. This is an amazing technology that I'm building my company around. So I don't want to make it out like there's not reason to be excited, but the Silicon Valley hype cycle is in full effect for sure.
And we're being told things like Claude co-work, which I actually use and actually am finding very useful. Are we being told how to save time, not necessarily how to grow revenue?
I think it all depends on who exactly you're listening to. So the right way to be thinking about this is to start, rather than thinking about it as what projects what I've got Claude co-work, for example. What can I do with this? Rather, you want to start from the other side of the problem and identify the constraint of the business. What business problems are actually preventing you from achieving your goals? And then once you've identified the constraint of the business, now you can say, okay, we almost certainly have tools available to us now that weren't available to us 6 months or a year ago, the last time we were considering this constraint. How can we use these tools to attack that specific problem?
Who are we listening to? Like who is showing up in the media? Who's showing up on social media? Who are the people that you're implying or maybe explicitly saying is telling us the wrong thing? Who should we be listening to? So first of all, why are we listening to those, and why are they appearing on social media and in the media, and who should we be listening to?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously everyone should listen to me all the time,
Of course.
Right? That goes without saying. I think a lot of this hype comes from the big AI labs. So you obviously get a lot of this kind of talk out of both Sam Altman of OpenAI and Dario Amodei of Anthropic. And then there's kind of a whole ecosystem underneath them of, you see a lot of these kind of business influencers. And a lot of times they'll be running ads. Sometimes they're just showing up organically in the algorithm, who are saying things like, I run my entire $80 million company on a team of 12 agents that just do everything for me while I sit by the pool and sip margaritas. And like, these are just straight lies that are meant to pitch whatever their course or product is that they're pitching at that particular time. So that kind of stuff is very attention getting, which is obviously the whole point, but doesn't reflect reality.
Yeah, I was talking to someone over the weekend and we were having this discussion that in our businesses, we're probably doing less because these AI agents and various other things within the AI, but we're actually spending time on building these systems and processes. So we're still working as hard, as you say, we're not sipping margaritas by the pool, but we're actually building these AI. The people that are invested in it and are using it are actually spending their time building it rather than actually doing the work. Do you see the same results?
Yeah, well, so there's kind of two things there. is one, I think that the best way, especially for small businesses, to be thinking about this is that we're not really ideally trying to replace human labor. What we're trying to do is superpower our existing team, right? So that if you used to be able to handle $1 million in revenue with your 3-person team, you put systems like this in place, and now that 3-person team can handle 4 million in revenue. Just completely made up numbers, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
All 3 of those people are still full-time employed and every bit as busy as they were now. But we've taken the mundane, repetitive parts of their job, moved them over into, let's say, agentic workflows that agents are handling. And now they're getting to focus on the stuff where humans actually need to be, right? Where we've got complex judgment calls, or we've got interpersonal relationships with clients or vendors that are really important. And it just so happens in most cases that lines up with the work that people actually want to do.
Yeah.
Rather than the tedium. The other thing that's certainly true, though, is there's this trope amongst engineers that goes back decades, right? Of, do you invest the time to build? So like in the last couple of decades, it's been software, right? I have some task that needs to be done. I could just open up Excel and do it manually. And let's say that'll take me an hour. Or I could write a Python script to do that same thing. Maybe writing the Python script would have also taken an hour. So in that, at iteration 1, our time is the same. But now the next time that task needs to be done, it'll take 20 seconds instead of an hour.
Yeah.
So I think right now that is happening with AI tools rather than Python programs, to take that example. And there are so many of those tools to be built. We're kind of seeing that pattern stack on top of each other, is I think what you're seeing.
So I worked in technology for a corporate, and I was working with some very, very intelligent, very hardworking software developers. What are software developers doing? Like with like as a layman in technology, I'm now able to write things in AI and get prompts and build things. What are the software engineers actually building now?
Yeah, so this is very much what we do. Like our main work output is custom software here in order to implement AI into people's businesses. And so obviously writing software now is wildly different than writing software just 2 or 3 years ago. And now it looks much more like you're coordinating a team of agents in order to get the job done. So we're doing, like, just to take that exact example, we're doing very little of the tedium of typing out if-then statements in order to ensure that the input conforms to a certain standard.
Yeah.
Right. And we're doing much more planning out the architecture of how this system is going to interact with that system, and what sort of data are we going to put in the database, and how are we going to structure it so that we're set up for these future changes that we know are coming down the pipe. So you've moved up the abstract stack so that it's much more architecting and managing and coordinating, and much less like hands on the shovel, digging the hole in the ground work.
Your traditional writing of code.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. We'll come back to this. I just want to touch on a little bit of your backstory. So you worked for companies like Toyota and Lockheed. What made you leave those stable jobs, so stable roles, and decide you wanted to work with more entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I've really, like, since college, I'd put myself in the wantrepreneur category. Like at almost all times since leaving college, I had some kind of side hustle I was at least daydreaming about, if not actively trying to move the ball forward on. And none of those went particularly well until I got to this custom software gig that is essentially the evolution of what I'm doing now. So that was in 2019, just before the pandemic. And I essentially started, this was before LLMs. I started writing custom software for manufacturing operations, who I knew, in order to do just normal back office kind of shuffling the paperwork around kind of tasks. And that had gone well. And then when AI really exploded onto the scene, say around 2023, that really started to take off because it benefits both sides of that business, right? Both now you can write code more quickly because of the stuff we were just talking about. And also there's now a whole new set of problems that you can solve with software because we have LLMs that you couldn't have solved with software before, because there's a lot of things that you can't express as a simple if-then statement in code, but you can throw at an LLM and get pretty good answers out of. So
what made you want to do the entrepreneurial side? Like what was this that you said you always wanted to do your own business, run your own show? Like, why do you think that is? What really drove you to lean into that?
So it's wanting to call my own shots, right? It's I would frequently disagree with leadership at my day job and think that I could see the picture better and make better decisions. And so I wanted to make those decisions.
Imagine this, you have a great business, strong results, and a message worth sharing, but most people outside your network still have no idea who you are. Growth slows when visibility stops. Podcast guesting solves that. Instead of chasing leads or interrupting people with ads, you speak directly to audiences who are already interested in your topic. They share your story, your approach, and your value you deliver. Trust is built before the first conversation. At Podcast Introduction, we help business owners get booked on the right shows. We research targeted podcasts, pitch you on your behalf, and position you as the expert, so every interview becomes a growth asset that drives leads and authority. If you want more visibility, more credibility, and more conversations with the right clients, podcast guesting is a powerful lever for you. Visit podcastintroduction.com and start expanding your reach today. Yeah, I understand that. So for you, when was it ChatGPT that really, because for most people it wasn't until ChatGPT actually came into existence, and the basic model you say around 2023, it's shocking, it's 3 years already. What were the challenges that you faced in 2023 of starting up your own company?
Yeah, so if we're talking around AI stuff, it's easy to forget how spoiled we are now with these new models. So context windows were incredibly tiny back then compared to what we're used to now. And the what's called context rot, which is this idea that as that context window fills up, as your chat with the AI grows longer and longer, performance decreases. Like effectively the model gets dumber as it's trying to hold more of this information in its head at one time. Obviously it doesn't have a head, but that's the metaphor, right? Both it loses the ability to reliably recall information in that window, and just overall kind of cognitive performance and problem solving goes down. And now we're talking about million token windows. In 2023, you were talking about like 25,000 token windows. So you wound up having to do a lot of writing traditional software in order to try to get just the right 25,000 tokens in order to feed into that thing to get the job done. And now, like I said, we can fairly easily throw 1 million tokens at a model. So it's still an issue. There are lots of problems that kind of want more than 1 million tokens, but it's way less of a challenge now. So obviously everyone knows the models have gotten smarter, but also the technical side of that, of like how much information they can hold at a time, has been a huge leap since then.
And we're building a lot of data centers at the moment, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely.
Globally, phenomenal amount. Do you think there's an element of we're building them? Is there a bubble within AI? I think that's what I'm trying to get. And what I'm trying to get at is that I read an article and it said that whenever you have these huge shifts in technology, you have an overstretch because the hype of AI, and it was like with railways and sort of the car as well. There's these huge steps forward, and because there's this huge hype that carries you along, there in essence is a bubble. It's not that the technology is going to fail, it's just there's this bubble, and we are building data centers. Like there's lots of planning to do this. Do you think there's a bubble that's going to happen with the AI when it comes to economics?
I mean, yes and no, to answer your
Okay.
question. So like, you've obviously got some insane valuations on companies, both public and private, that are working in this space right now. If you ask me, what do I think are the chances that some of those valuations go down in the next 3 to 5 years? Like 100%. But also, what are the chances that the world needs less GPU compute, which is the kind of computer horsepower that these models run on? What is the chance the world needs less GPU compute 5 years from now? 0%. So like the trend is certainly going to continue. I don't see any way that it wouldn't, short of catastrophe. But I'm certain that there are some malinvestments in the market that are going to wind up getting cleaned up. I don't think that means that the technology is going to go away or become less useful, or even be kind of less useful than people are expecting. I think when you hear about the hype that we were talking about earlier, that somebody's sitting by the pool and 7 agents are running his $10 million company, it's not that I don't think that'll ever happen. It's just not happening right now.
Yeah. And do you think this is an interesting one that someone talked to me a couple of weeks ago, was the first billionaire solopreneur? How long do you think we'll have to wait until that?
Oh, that's an interesting. So let's see here. So if we're talking billionaire in terms of enterprise value, so what a software company might have a 10x multiple. So then you're talking 100 million in revenue. How long until a solo person can get some SaaS platform to 100 million in revenue? That might happen soon.
How long?
Especially if we factor in, maybe we say solopreneur and they've got a handful of offshore VAs or that kind of thing, doing the occasional task that they can't delegate. I wouldn't at all be shocked if that happened in the next couple of years.
Wow. We're talking fast then.
Yeah. No, and it's not so much because I think that the typical $1 billion company could be entirely replaced, but there's a like very specific, I'm thinking of essentially an enterprise SaaS company, right? Where both you've got a huge valuation multiple and a huge revenue per client and a bunch of retention, and it's already a very tech heavy kind of software centric business. Like, yeah,
it's now
for a particular type of company, that'll happen for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Right. When someone says to you, a client or your prospect that you're talking, I want AI, what's my first step?
Yeah, so this actually happens fairly frequently. Like a lot of times when I have a first conversation with people, it'll be like, hey, I know there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in this space. I kind of feel like I'm left out or left behind. So I want to start doing something, but I'm not sure where to start, right? Or maybe they've got a couple ideas and they're like very aware that those might not be the optimal ideas. So the framework we go through here is to first identify the constraints of the business, like I was talking about earlier, and to then see if there's some way that we can use these technologies in order to attack that constraint. So the first step is deciding whether you're demand constrained or supply constrained. And the heuristic I like to use here is how often are you throttling back your sales and marketing efforts because you're worried you're not going to be able to deliver if more sales come in the door. If the answer to that is never or almost never, then you're probably demand constrained. And if you could just generate some more demand, things would be better. But if you're like, oh no, I'm holding off on sales and marketing frequently because I'm worried we're not going to be able to deliver, then in that case, you're supply constrained, and we want to be looking on that side of the house. So in the first case where we're demand constrained, we're going to be looking at things like marketing efforts, sales systems, that kind of thing. And in the other case where we're supply constrained, we're going to be looking at the workflows that our team is doing and seeing if we can build an agent to automate one or multiple of those workflows in order to free up a bunch of their time so that we can then go hit the demand side and fill their calendars back up.
So let's just take the example of demand constrained. So that's you haven't got enough leads. You're looking to build marketing and sales. So what can people do? Because I think I can say this as a small business owner with some confidence that what AI has done for content side, and that's part of lead generation, there are obviously other aspects of it. It has sped up the process. So even you run it through ChatGPT or Claude and you want to produce some content, whether it's organic or paid ads, whatever you're doing, you're trying to create some more visibility and more buzz. AI has sped that process up. It's not perfect by any stretch, and it's now becoming a lot more obvious to people when they're doing things like that. What do you suggest when we want to sort of build more leads, generate more sales? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so one of our favorite tactics to pull out here is an AI powered lead magnet, right? So like everybody's heard of the kind of more traditional lead magnet where maybe you're offering a PDF with the top 10 tips for XYZ, whatever problem you solve is, or a training video, or there's all sorts of lead magnets that people have sort of traditionally. But all of those lead magnets fall into the category of it's a single static thing that you're providing to many people, right? Because you want it to be essentially zero delivery cost on your end. The cool thing here is we can use AI to tailor that delivery specifically to the prospect and make it way more valuable for them without having to take any of your team's time. Right. So to give you some examples here, like everybody's seen website graders, like HubSpot's website grader that grades you on SEO. Yeah. You have, let's say you had a marketing agency that specialized in conversion rate optimization, right? So you have a playbook that you run of, best practices that you look at a landing page and this is the sort of stuff we got to change. You could imagine here that you generate a lead magnet, which is a free CRO audit of your landing page. So like you drive traffic to your own landing page. They'd put in the URL for their landing page they want evaluated. Yeah. We then scrape that page, send its content off to an LLM along with a guide from you and your team on sort of here's our best practices for landing page conversion rate optimization. We want the copy to be like this, color theme like that, design layout like this. And then we could have that AI probably following a template so that we make sure we've got a certain quality here. Build a PDF that says like, hey, we took a look at your landing page and we think you need a stronger headline, maybe something worded more like this. We think your call to action button needs to be above the fold. It's too low down on the page. You get the idea, these sorts of things. Yeah. And then you collect the person's email in order to email them that PDF report of here's 6 things that you could do to improve CRO on your landing page. And then at the bottom of that report is, hey, would you like some more help optimizing these assets or putting these practices into motion? Click here and book a call and see if we can help you out with that. So it's the exact same benefit as the traditional lead magnet in that you're starting off the relationship by providing value and by establishing yourself as an authority in the space. It's just way more useful because rather than, to take that example, rather than 10 tips to optimize a landing page, it's specific feedback on this person's landing page.
Yeah, that's great. And those things are definitely like I get you, like you importantly you said there's a template that's for you to sort of make sure that your analysis is correct and
so kind of there's 2 things there which are sort of separate ideas but both important. The first one is that we definitely want to generate a document, which effectively winds up being a prompt, where we're teaching the AI what to look for in this landing page example, and like how we would correct them, right? So like, here's some examples of bad headlines. We don't want to say things like this. Here's some examples of good headlines. We do want to say things like that. You're going to get much better results by giving it your actual expertise rather than just relying on the base model. Because the other thing here, of course, anybody could go and drop their landing page into ChatGPT and just see what the base ChatGPT says. The value you're adding here is exactly that expertise in that prompt. But then the second thing is kind of a template for the output. So the way that these assets wind up looking best is when we'll build out a template, often with a graphic designer for something like this. And then we'll just kind of have blank spots for, point number 1 and some bullets, point number 2 and some bullets, point number 3 and some bullets. And then we ask the AI to produce structured output in order to fill in that template. So now we can have a lot higher confidence that every single one of these PDFs we generate is going to be branded nicely and look nice and pretty, and you don't get kind of AI randomness occasionally making a janky looking output on you.
And what is the best platform for that? Is ChatGPT? Everyone seems to be moving to Claude with the US legislation stuff to do with that. Like, what is for that specifically? Because I know you've got different, like, Manus is for websites, you've got Gamma for slides. For that sort of idea, I'm trying to think of for my audience, would ChatGPT be a good platform? Is Claude the better platform? Is there another?
I'm glad you asked, because this brings up like a whole other point to talk about. One of the things I'm always harping on is ROI. And another thing I'm always harping on is trying to avoid vendor lock-in. So all of these major labs are investing probably billions of dollars a quarter in making these models better and more capable. And I think that you're right. Kind of the zeitgeist right now is very pro Claude for good reason. If we had to vote, I'd say that's probably the best all-around model right now. But how much would I bet that Claude is going to have the best all-around model 6 months from now or 3 months from now? Not very much. It's not that I've got anything against Anthropic. It's just that there's a lot of really smart people playing in this space, and they haven't always been in the front, and I doubt they will always be in the front. So all of these systems that we're building, we are very intentionally treating the LLM as an interchangeable Lego brick that we can swap in and out. So we're building a system, and one part of that system is this LLM brain, but it's interchangeable. So one of the things we'll do when we make like a grader, like we were talking about there, is we'll set it up so that we can select which LLM it's running through, and we'll take an example and run it through each of the major ones, right? Run it through Gemini and Grok and ChatGPT and Claude, and look at the output. And for any given case, you might kind of like the one vibe of the one model better than the others, because they definitely all have their own personality. But then beyond that, you want to have this interchangeability in case next month we get Gemini 3.5 and it's just mind-blowingly amazing and knocks everybody else out of the water. We don't want to go like, oh man, I'm stuck in Anthropic world. It's got to be on Claude. So I guess I got to wait for them to catch up. We want to just to be able to go to a drop down and select and now point our model over at that new hotness.
So I must admit, I'm using Gemini for images. I'm using ChatGPT because it's where I've spent most of the amount of time in, so it knows me very well. For written stuff, Claude is better. So I'm actually, but I don't think that's. I think that's because I'm sort of open-minded to use different tools. I know some people that I know that, well, I started on ChatGPT and I'll be ChatGPT till I die, sort of that sort of mentality. It is the best thing for small business owners that might be listening and watching to actually flex between different platforms. Is that your suggested route?
Yep. If so, assuming you're interested enough in this sort of stuff that doesn't just immediately turn you off, absolutely. Like, play around with multiple of them. And a lot like you just noted, I kind of have my favorites for specific use cases.
Yeah.
And I'm not at all locked into those will always be the favorites
Right.
for that. Right. But right now, exactly like you said, like anything that has to do with visual stuff, either generating images or consuming images, like I want to feed it an image and then have it tell me something about that image. Gemini is solidly on top of all the others right now. Things that have to do with like a breaking news, latest events, like here we're in April 2026 and world news has been unfortunately rather exciting. I don't know if exciting is the right word. It's been eventful lately.
Yes.
I really like Grok for this because it's integrated very tightly with Twitter or X. And is very quick to go pull all of the latest tweets on a given topic and then kind of give you a synopsis of it, which when you've got kind of live late breaking news situations is fantastic. So yeah, I think the optimal strategy is kind of figuring out which ones you like best for which use cases and sort of being promiscuous.
Is it inevitable that Google with Gemini will win the race?
I don't think anything's inevitable. But Google's got very deep pockets. The other thing that's interesting about Google is they're the only one of the major players who are fine if the AI doesn't turn a short-term profit. Right. They have an extremely profitable company if they never touched AI. Whereas that's not true of the other players in this race. So they don't need to chase short-term gain. They're free to think much longer term. So I think there's certainly an interesting bet. But yeah, I wouldn't place any kind of significant long-term bet on who wins here. Hopefully there isn't a single winner.
Yeah.
Right. Hopefully it stays an ecosystem like this.
How did you work with your first clients? You touched on it, working with manufacturing clients. How did you start working with clients when it comes specifically with AI? What were the user cases and what were the wins, the successes that you had with your first few clients?
Yep. So some of the very first use cases come around kind of inconsistent inputs, right? So here, this was a manufacturing operation which would receive purchase orders from customers and need them to be entered into the MRP system, kind of the software that's running the whole factory. And this is exactly the sort of thing that is nigh impossible to do with if-then statements, because there are both, like, essentially every customer has a different purchase order template. And then there are an infinite number of strange things that a person might do when filling out the purchase order, right? Maybe it gets post-dated to some weird date in the future. Maybe it gets broken up into multiple line items instead of combined into one. Maybe there's a slight typo in the part number that they're ordering, and all of that kind of stuff. Like when you try to just do this with old school if-then code, makes it very brittle. Like you can write a system to digest these particular purchase orders from this customer, and that works right up until they change their PO format or somebody does something strange and then it breaks. But then you sort of need to do that for each customer, and the less consistent they are and the more customers you have, just the more you're not going to get an ROI there, and you might as well have a person manually entering orders. So one of the early use cases here was ingesting those purchase orders, kind of providing the PDF to the AI, having it extract out the critical information about part number, quantity, due date, and then entering that order into the system automatically.
And were you initially working with, was it a small manufacturing outfit? Was it a like how would you describe it? Small, medium, sort of large enterprise? What was the?
Yep. So that one in particular is around 20 people. So in the overall scheme of things, that's small, although 20 people is a significant operation. So to give you a kind of range of the sorts of companies that we work with now, sort of they've got to be large enough that that they can stroke the check to make a real investment in this sort of thing. It very much depends on how profitable it is, but like the rough number I typically use for this is like 5 million in revenue.
Okay.
Obviously, exact revenue doesn't matter, but you've got to be big enough that you can stroke 5-figure checks and not have a heart attack, essentially, is the line there. And then there is a ceiling on that too, because you get to a point where when a company gets sufficiently large, there's no longer a single person, at least who a vendor is likely to talk to, who can call all the shots, right? So when you get too large, you get all these bureaucracies of, oh, well, if we want to do that, legal's got to sign off on it first. Yeah. And if you want to do that, then the IT director's got to sign off on it first. And you say, okay, well, how long until we can get the IT director to sign off on it? Long. 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
It's like, this project could have been done in 2 weeks, and now we got to wait 3 to 4. So sort of when they get too large, it's not that we can't provide value, but the speed at which we can provide value just falls off a cliff. Yeah. So kind of the sweet spot there is that like 5 to 50 or 5 to 100 $1 million revenue businesses where you're probably talking to a single person who can call all the shots, where even if there is a legal guy and an IT guy, there's somebody above both of them who can tell them just to get in line and we're getting this project done.
Yeah. So how much of this are you building sort of custom AI for your clients? How much of it is bespoke and custom that you're building, and how much is templates, frameworks that you've either used before or that are part of other tools that you're using?
Yeah. So in modern software development, like everything is kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Like we're using Python itself is an open source programming languages. We're using frameworks like Django, which is a web application framework. So kind of everything is building on templates and building blocks to build this stuff. But then you will always have a layer of custom work on top of that. So sorry, it's not quite an answer to the question, but essentially everything is bespoke and custom, but we're also very much standing on the shoulders of giants here to help us see far and move fast.
Yeah. How do you sell the ROI of what you're delivering rather than I'm building you something for your tech, for your company?
Yeah. It does get tricky sometimes. So it can be difficult to expose like what the actual number is. So it's a back and forth of trying to get at the cost of whatever problem that we're looking at, or the kind of what opportunity we're leaving on the table by not attacking this particular issue. And it can be challenging to put a dollar number on, but once you can do that, you can then obviously frame the project much more clearly and have an idea of whether it's going to make sense. And I want to be clear here, it doesn't always, right? It's fairly common that someone will come up with an idea and be all spun up about it. And then when we think it through, it's like, well, your current team has a junior person spending 2 hours a month on that task. Like if we math this out, it's going to take an awfully long time to ROI that. So even though we think this is a juicy target for automation, that's probably not it. We probably ought to look elsewhere in the organization.
That's great. I think that gives you some sort of good business sense that if there is a junior that can do the work, I think it in some cases, but exposing them to AI could actually help as well. Because this was one of the questions I wanted to ask was, is AI going to replace jobs, or is it just going to expose bad businesses?
So this is obviously kind of $1 million question. Like I said, I always like to tackle these from, we want to take our current team and give them superpowers so that we can accomplish more with a given team size. But obviously there's that tension of, if you did that growth without the AI, you probably would have had to have hired. So there are fewer jobs there from that. However, we're also massively increasing productivity. So hopefully the whole economy is going to be going and will create those jobs elsewhere. So I'm certainly no Nobel Prize economist who's going to predict all of this, but I don't think it's a simple answer either way. So I don't think it's that no one's going to lose their job from AI. That's almost certainly already happened. But I also am not a doomer. I don't think the apocalypse is coming and none of us are going to have jobs to do.
Yeah, I this is a terrible example, but I always think like the change from horses to cars, there was a whole job. This is terrible, but clearing up horse poo. That was one of the jobs that they had in the streets. There was someone who would tidy it up. Now, obviously, when cars came along, that job went. But then there was probably jobs in the manufacturing, building the cars. There's always nothing, and you're absolutely right what you said earlier. There are so many doomsayers here that it's going to replace everyone's jobs. All of the graduates are never going to be able to work again, and this whole horror story which sells newspapers and sells stories and gets onto the headline. But in reality, do you think graduates, do you think younger people should be positioning themselves as an expert in AI to be able to secure that long-term job growth, career growth, business for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think anybody with ambition, who hopefully a recent graduate certainly falls into that category. Like the skill that I pitch a lot when I'm recruiting to hire, right, is I say, here you're going to learn the skill of making AIs do economically valuable work.
Great.
Right. And we do that a lot with custom software, but obviously you can do that without specifically writing custom software. I think that's probably the highest leverage skill of the next, I don't know if anybody can predict a decade out right now, but next few years anyway.
Yeah, I think so.
And back on the economic point too, there's an analogy I like to bring up a lot. So here in the US, in early mid 1800s, something like that, it was a very agrarian country, and it was something like over 90% of the population was involved in agriculture. Right. And today, obviously, after we've had the industrial and the technological revolution,
sure.
It's something like a couple percent, like 2 or 3% of the country is involved in agriculture. And certainly as factories started to take over and as you started to get mechanized farm equipment, so let's say late 1800s, if you would have gone back to one of those folks and said in 2026, only 2% of the country is going to be involved in agriculture, they would think nobody's going to have any food and it's just Great Depression territory. Nobody has any jobs. Nobody has any food. This must be a dystopia. But actually, like if we brought one of them here in a time machine, they'd think it was a utopia, right? Yeah. There's essentially infinite food compared to what there was for most of history. Yeah. And everyone has creature comforts that they couldn't have dreamed of back then, because even though the number of jobs in agriculture shrank to nothing, the productivity of each of those agricultural jobs exploded simultaneously with that. And that allowed us to create all these other industries that didn't exist at the time.
Absolutely.
So it's not a perfect parallel. We could definitely come up with ways where this is different than that, but I sure hope it turns out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think you've evolved as a leader?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few parallels between kind of leading a group of agents to get some task done and leading a group of humans. And most of it is around clear and unambiguous communication, right? So it is kind of pushes you more towards making fewer assumptions and being more explicit when you communicate what output you want to see. And I think that the experience of doing that all day, every day with AI agents has then helped me, and hopefully some other people too, do a better job of more explicit communication with humans.
That's interesting.
So I think there's an analogy I use a lot. There's a whole category of kind of folklore tales where maybe you're making a wish to a genie, or you're making a deal with the devil. These kind of stories where you have to be like very careful about what you wish for, because kind of the person that you're dealing with might twist the meaning and honor the word, but not the spirit of the deal. And I don't at all think LLMs are malicious, but there's a lot of parallels there where like you have to be, especially when you have an agent set up with a lot of power that can do things, you have to be very careful exactly what you wish for. That's a little bit like you're wording that wish to the mischievous genie, that if it misunderstands and then runs off down a rail, you could get an output that is not what you were hoping for.
Yeah. So you think you've got a better communicator as a leader of people and of agents?
Yeah, and specifically in being kind of making fewer assumptions, being more explicit about what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Which I suppose it might take a certain personality type to like that sort of communication, but lucky for me, engineers have a lot of that sort of personality type.
Absolutely. What would you say your risk appetite is now, and how has it changed over the years?
I definitely think the success of this venture of Laconic Tech, along with the fact that I see how powerful this technology is and how it's only going to get better. Sam Altman is famous for saying at each of the major launches that this is the dumbest AI you're ever going to have to work with, right? Even when they're launching their new hotness, that it's just getting better from here. I think that has me in more of a risk on sort of appetite. I'm probably still more risk averse than a lot of people are, but I think if you plotted my risk appetite over time, it's probably gone up because of this.
And you see the potential, because the next question I wanted to ask was like, how are you sort of planning the next 2 to 5 years? Or is there so much disruption and evolution that we're going to have in that 2 to 5 year period? It's very hard to see. Like, so what would you say your plan is for the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah. I mean, especially in my space where I am explicitly implementing these systems, right? I think if I were to make a 2 to 5 year plan, it would just be fantasy. I think I'm more on like a 2 to 5 month kind of time frame, and that more has to do with balancing like hiring and the rate that we're bringing on new work, kind of the classic problem of growing a business, right? Of how much you're bringing in the door and what your capability to actually deliver is. It's made more complicated by the fact that as these systems get better, kind of our productivity goes up significantly. So you've got to factor that in. But that's basically how it's working right now. I think more on 2 to 5 month timelines than 2 to 5 year timelines.
How are you keeping abreast and up to date of all the new changes within AI? What's your strategy?
Yeah. So this is, at least for me, and maybe this might just be the stuff that the algorithm feeds me. I find I have to be really careful about filtering. So there might be a dozen new AI tools or techniques or products that come to my attention every day. So if I spent half an hour reading into each of those to see what it was and if it would be useful to me, I wouldn't get anything else done. So I have to apply this sort of algorithm for myself where I wait until I've seen, we'll call it a particular idea, right? Maybe it's a product or a technique or a new model. I wait until I've seen it from multiple independent sources before I'll decide it's worth going and investing time in learning about that thing. And this leads to, there's a lot. I will have clients or prospects ask me, hey, have you seen XYZ.ai or this.ai or that.ai? And I'll have to say, like, nope, I'm not familiar with it. We can pull up the site and we'll see what we can learn right now. But if I went and chased down every one of these things to try to be abreast of all of it, I wouldn't get a single other thing done.
So where should a business owner be trusting the information that comes through to us? Because as you say, like we could spend just as much. What should we be reading? What should we be watching?
I think that same heuristic could work well for everyone, right? So in terms of deciding where to go learn more, wait until you're seeing it in multiple independent places, right? So the first question is, you're hearing about Claude Cowork and OpenAI Codex, and there's 100 agentic platforms out there right now, and OpenClaw, and a bunch of software as a service style agents. And to really learn what any of these are and what they're capable of, might take an hour of your time. So I would very much recommend the first time you hear about one of these, just kind of make a mental note that so-and-so mentioned OpenClaw, and then go about your day. And then only when you see that in 2, 3, 4 places do you go, okay, I better go learn what this OpenClaw thing is.
Okay, but what I'm trying to sort of like get to is, should we be reading articles? Should we be watching videos? Should we be looking on social media? Should we be looking at newspapers? Where is the places for a business owner, whether it's a business, a solopreneur up to $100 million business? Where should we be targeting those sources of information rather than, I get your point, like I never moved on Claude Cowork until I saw it a few times and I saw what the capability of it was, and I was like, actually I'm going to pay some attention and invest in that and my time into it, and I've built some things from there. What are the platforms, what are the places that we as business owners should be trusting where that information is coming from?
Gotcha. So I mean, I think a lot of this is just kind of normal internet literacy stuff, of be skeptical of people who are trying to sell you something, because there's a lot of that going on right now. And then I can give you my favorite sources for this stuff. So Twitter or X is kind of a great place for kind of keeping your finger on the pulse of, you will get a lot of noise, but there's a lot of signal in that lot of noise too, right? So that's kind of my discovery layer, let's call it, like where I'll first hear about this stuff. And then when I want to do deep dives on things, my go-to is YouTube.
Right.
So you've got to have a filter, because there's certainly plenty of trash on there too, but this is just kind of living on the modern internet. When there's a particular technology that I want to investigate, YouTube is usually my go-to.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my place is, instead of X, Twitter, is actually TikTok, because there's a lot of, it's aimed for younger than I am, but it's aimed for the younger generation. But when I see it happening a couple of different times, I'm like, okay. And then as I say, YouTube is still.
I'm almost 40, so I don't think they'll let me on TikTok. Like it does.
Well, I'm 46.
Like,
I just turned 46, and I'm on TikTok. So, and to be honest, Ken, you will be on TikTok in a week's time as well, because we post on TikTok as well. So you will be there. Don't worry about it, even if you don't have an account. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision you've made?
Taking Laconic Tech full-time after I got laid off.
So that's interesting. You were laid off. So it actually, you were pushed into that decision rather than you fully fledged jumped.
Yep. It was perfect timing. So I was right at the point where things were going well enough. I was thinking, gee, maybe I ought to take this full time. And there'd been 3 rounds of layoffs at my day job at the time, and I'd survived all 3. And round 4 got me. And obviously I could have gone and looked for another engineering job at that point and just kept this as a side hustle. But I was pretty convicted at the time that I wanted to take this full time. And, obviously I've got a wife and 3 kids. Those count as the best decisions of my life, but that's the best decision of my career for sure.
Amazing. Next question. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
So it would have been around that same time where I was trying to figure out sort of exactly what niche to attack, right? What my product offering is here, who I'm making that offering to. And an agency owner who I was working with said, look, just go fire up as many conversations with people as you can, and then try to help them. And like, you're capable enough that this is all just going to work itself out and become clear by doing that. And I followed that strategy, and it worked extremely well.
Amazing. Great piece of advice. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Does this need to be someone I know personally, or can we do an internet personality?
However you wish.
If we can go the internet personality route, I'm gonna say Alex Hormozy.
Right.
So ever since he kind of sold Gym Launch and started the kind of online content maker or whatever, influencer, I guess. I don't know that you'd like that, but let's call him an influencer. I've been following that stuff closely and reading all of his books, and I would largely credit his philosophies with a lot of my success.
Right. And is there someone who's not on the internet that you would say?
Yeah, so probably yeah, it's a little tacky, but I'll have to go with my dad, who's not around anymore. He died in 2019, but he was a harper on work ethic, to the point that like I often clashed with him when I was young, as no like young boys love being harped on about work ethic. But that certainly was successfully installed in me and has obviously been a tremendous asset. And I think about it a lot with my kids now.
Brilliant. Tell me about a regret that you have.
Not jumping earlier. Yeah, that one's easier. Waiting to get laid off. Right. So I wish I would have just jumped earlier and gone full-time on the entrepreneurial venture.
Why?
Because then I could have started this journey years earlier and I'd be years further down the path.
Yeah, fair enough. Next question, quickly moving on. Was there a time when you wanted to give up in your entrepreneurial journey, and what pulled you through?
Man, no, I don't know that I ever wanted to give up. Like, to take your question literally, no, I didn't ever want to give up. I wanted to keep going at every point through this. I had multiple ventures that failed, kind of stuff that failed to get lit, or stuff that started sparking and then you couldn't really get the fire going. And when that happens, it's certainly, you feel dejected, right? You feel like a bit of a failure. But I don't think at any point in there did I want to give up. Quite the opposite. I wanted to keep going.
Before we go on to the next question, something what's interesting. So as I said, I worked with software developers for 10 years. And you are an archetypal engineer as a person, the way you talking to me, the way you, yeah. And it is a good thing. Absolutely is a good thing. But I get a lot of business owners who are the visionary, the dreamer, the strategy guy. How do you interweave the engineer side of you and the strategy side of being the business owner, entrepreneur that's driving your business forward? How do you reconcile those two different sides?
Yeah, so in engineering, a lot we'll call this systems level thinking or systems engineering. Yeah. And it's the process of chunking up, really, right? So it's the visionary might say, we've got a 10x revenue in the next 24 months. And like, that's great, but isn't terribly actionable for anyone. So then engineers just immediately start breaking that down into lower and lower levels, right? Okay, so if we're going to 10x inventory in 24 or 10x revenue in 24 months, that means we need this growth rate. In order to get to that growth rate, that means we need this many sales calls. In order to get to this many sales calls, it means we need this many leads. In order to get this many leads, if our current CPA holds up, we need this much advertising spend, right? To like take that example. And then you'd have a whole other chain of reasoning there about delivery, right? So the first place I went in thinking about it was, what do you need in order to make those sales to double? But then you've also got to deliver on that. So you'll have a similar chain of reasoning. And that kind of stuff, like you pointed out, comes naturally to engineers, but it's the process of taking
reverse
that high level
engineering,
visionary
reverse engineering the goal, what you want to achieve,
breaking it down into sequentially smaller and smaller chunks until you get to the point of like, okay, there's the thing to do. Start there.
It's so interesting. Someone who was a mentor of mine said to me on another topic, he said, engineers are the worst and the best entrepreneurs there are available, because an engineer struggles to make that step into the entrepreneurial world because they're quite risk averse and they've built their systems for their company and all these sorts of things. But once they get it, once they get the vision, they do exactly what you've just described. They reverse engineer all these different, the goal and how to do it on this work stream and this work stream and this work stream, and then you have success. It was really fascinating. It's really made me think of him today, because it was fascinating the way that you reverse engineered it. And now you then know what the step is on this workflow, on this workflow, on this workflow. Come on, guys, let's go and do it.
Yep, that's exactly what we're doing when we're breaking up these workflows into skills and then building out the skill for the agent to follow. It's that exact process.
Wonderful. Amazing. Tell me something about you that most people don't know about you.
So I live in the absolute middle of nowhere, which is a bit unusual for a tech person, right? I'm nowhere near a big tech hub. I'm on a dirt road off of another dirt road in the mountains of New Hampshire.
Right.
We have to use Starlink to get good internet here in order to talk to you.
Right.
And I very much love it that way, which is probably fairly unusual for people in the tech world like this. It's probably a bimodal distribution, right? So tech folks are probably either off in the middle of nowhere on the side of a mountain like I am, or they're in San Francisco or New York or Boston.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued. You've got a picture of the world behind you. What's the inspiration behind that?
I wish it was a great story, but it's that my wife likes TJ Maxx, which is a kind of tchotchke chain here in the US. Yeah. And she needed to decorate the wall behind me.
As good a reason as any reason. My wife makes all the decisions when it comes to decorating, color schemes. It's what my wife does. It sounds like your wife does exactly the same. So that's brilliant. And my last question of these quickfire questions is, what does legacy mean to you?
So, I mean, the first place I go is my kids, right? So I think when you say legacy, like the first thing that comes to mind is me trying to set up my kids to be good people and have happy lives and good lives. And yeah, I know it's a business show, and like we're probably largely thinking about business or finances when we think of that kind of stuff. But the first place I go is making sure my kids grow up to be good people.
That's amazing. That is really what our legacy is. Whatever grandiose plans of impacting the world for decades, just make your kids as best as you can. I think that's a wonderful closing of this conversation. So thank you, Ken. Thank you so much for your time today. If you've enjoyed this conversation with Ken and you've took something valuable away from it, make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes of Business Growth Talks. And I'd love to hear from you. Drop in the comments below. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was from today's conversation. And thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.